What if one of the world's most admired companies, a titan of aviation that engineers the very machines that connect our modern world, was secretly operating a vast criminal empire? For years, Airbus concealed a corrupt shadow unit, the bullcrap castle, that orchestrated a global bribery machine. When this fortress of deceit finally cracked, it triggered a record-shattering fine and a punishment of biblical proportions designed to shake the corporate world. But the most shocking secret isn't the crime or the penalty, it's what happened to the architects of the operation. Today, we uncover the intricate story of this scandal, exploring how a historic fine created a new and controversial form of corporate justice. We will ask the haunting, unresolved question: in a scandal this massive, did anyone actually go to jail? Imagine the gleaming, state-of-the-art Airbus headquarters in Toulouse, France. It's a place of brilliant minds, advanced composites, and cutting-edge aerodynamics. On paper, this global behemoth was protected by a robust anti-corruption program, complete with dedicated compliance officers, multi-layered approval processes, and a strict code of conduct. This was the face Airbus showed the world: responsible, ethical, and meticulously controlled. But this entire structure was a facade, a paper-thin shield deliberately engineered to conceal a much darker, parallel reality. The real work, the dirty work that secured billion-dollar contracts, was being done by a secretive division known as the Strategy and Marketing Organization, or SMO. Officially, the SMO's mandate sounded harmless, even bureaucratic. It was tasked with selecting and managing Airbus's sprawling global network of over 1,750 third-party consultants and business partners. These were supposed to be legitimate agents, providing market analysis and strategic advice. In reality, the SMO was the operational hub of a global bribery network, the engine of a systemic criminal enterprise. Its true function was to identify, vet, and funnel illicit payments to anyone, anywhere in the world, who could influence a lucrative aircraft deal. It was a weaponized division, turning the art of the sale into the science of corruption. The operation was so vast and so openly cynical that the company's own CEO at the time, Tom Enders, allegedly gave the division its infamous nickname, the bullcrap castle. This wasn't a system that was failing, it was a system working exactly as its masters had designed it, a culture where the relentless pressure to secure commercial victories systematically overrode any and all ethical or legal concerns. The compliance program wasn't just weak, it was complicit, a smokescreen that provided a veneer of legitimacy while the castle's architects conducted their illegal business as a matter of routine. This shadow unit had perfected the art of hiding in plain sight. But how does a machine this corrupt actually move billions of dollars across international borders without getting caught? As investigators would discover, you don't use suitcases full of cash, you use a playbook. To channel millions of dollars in illicit cash to foreign officials and airline executives, the SMO didn't rely on clumsy, old-fashioned methods. It developed and perfected a sophisticated set of tools designed to make corrupt payments look like mundane, legitimate business expenses. This was the dark art of corporate bribery, and the SMO were masters of the craft. Their primary technique was the creation of fraudulent consulting contracts. Agreements would be drawn up for services that were never intended to be rendered, with detailed invoices submitted for market analysis or strategic advice that was never delivered. This created a seemingly legitimate paper trail, allowing multi-million-dollar payments to flow undetected through corporate accounts. This financial sleight of hand was managed through a labyrinthine network of shell companies, many of which were registered in opaque offshore financial havens. This complex web was designed to deliberately break the chain of evidence, obscuring the origin and destination of the funds and making them exceptionally difficult for auditors to trace. But some of the SMO's schemes were far more audacious, moving beyond simple fraudulent contracts into the realm of brazen influence peddling. In one of the most flagrant examples, Airbus funneled an astonishing $50 million to a sports team. On the surface, it could be dismissed as a massive, if unusual, marketing deal. But this was no ordinary sponsorship. The team was directly owned by two of the most powerful executives at AirAsia, a key Airbus customer that was, at that very moment, in the process of negotiating an order for 180 new aircraft. The payment was a direct multi-million-dollar reward, a quid pro quo thinly disguised as a promotional expense. It was a masterclass in laundering a bribe in plain sight. This playbook playbook was not a one-off, it was a global strategy adapted and deployed across dozens of countries. In Ghana, a consultant hired to help sell 3 C-295 military transport aircraft just happened to be a close relative of a high-ranking and influential government official. In Sri Lanka, the intermediary chosen to secure a deal with the state-owned airline was the wife of a senior executive directly involved in the procurement process. For nearly a decade, the system seemed flawless, an invisible and ruthlessly effective machine for winning contracts. But what happens when a machine this perfect, this arrogant, finally begins to crack? That's when Airbus was faced with a choice that would cost them everything. But why would a company at the absolute zenith of its industry, a celebrated European champion, risk its entire existence on such a reckless and illegal strategy? To understand the motive, you have to understand that the Airbus scandal didn't happen in a vacuum. It was forged in the crucible of the most intense and bitter corporate rivalry in modern history. The answer has a name: Boeing. For decades, Airbus and Boeing have been locked in a relentless, zero-sum battle for supremacy in the skies. Every single aircraft order, from a small domestic carrier to a massive flag carrier fleet renewal, was a hard-fought war. These weren't just business deals, they were geopolitical events with national pride, tens of thousands of jobs, and technological dominance on the line. This intense pressure created a corporate culture at Airbus defined by one overwhelming imperative: win at all costs. Failure was not an option, and the ends frequently justified the means. Within this high-stakes environment, the strategy and marketing organization was not just a tool for generating profit, it was a strategic weapon in this corporate war. When a critical deal was on the line in a high-risk country and the competition was fierce, the SMO was deployed to ensure an Airbus victory. The bribery it facilitated was seen by some as a necessary, if unspoken, part of the game, a cost of doing business in a fiercely competitive global marketplace. The pressure to beat Boeing year after year, order after order, normalized the breaking of rules and created a state of collective myopia where ethical lines became blurred and eventually disappeared entirely. This culture of relentless competition, this obsession with victory, made Airbus a global powerhouse. It also made the company blind to the catastrophic risk it was running. The rules of corporate warfare were about to be rewritten, and the battle was about to move from the marketplace to the courtroom in a way no one at Airbus could have ever imagined. A rigorous internal audit commissioned under a new compliance drive had uncovered the rot at the heart of the company. The findings landed on the desks of the highest levels of leadership like a ticking time bomb. The bullcrap castle was no longer a secret. Airbus was now facing an existential threat of its own making. Under strict French anti-corruption laws, a criminal conviction could lead to a corporate death penalty, the mandatory revocation of its operating licenses. For a company that is also a major defense contractor, being debarred from public contracts is not a setback. It is the end. Internal estimates painted a terrifying picture. If they were to be caught and prosecuted without cooperating, the fines could soar as high as a catastrophic €8 billion. Their global empire, built over decades of innovation and struggle, was on the verge of complete collapse. The leadership was faced with an impossible choice: wait for the inevitable dawn raid and face corporate death, or attempt a controlled demolition. They chose the latter. This was not a decision born of conscience, it was a cold, calculated strategy for survival. In August 2016, Airbus executives walked into the office of the UK's Serious Fraud Office and confessed. They strategically self-reported their own systemic crimes, laying the company bare before the authorities. It was a massive, unprecedented gamble. By offering full and exemplary cooperation, they hoped to control the narrative, mitigate the penalties, and save the company from oblivion. In doing so, they likely saved themselves around $4 billion. But they had also just opened the floodgates. Airbus had voluntarily unleashed a global dragnet, and now a team of the world's most powerful prosecutors was about to descend. This was not a standard national investigation. This was the financial equivalent of a multinational special operations mission, a new frontier in the fight against corporate crime. In a landmark move that would change the landscape of global enforcement, authorities in France's Parquet National Financier and the United Kingdom's Serious Fraud Office formed a joint investigation team. This was an unprecedented alliance, a formal agreement to pool resources, share evidence seamlessly, and pursue a unified strategy. They were soon joined by their powerful counterparts in the US Department of Justice. This trilateral force effectively cornered Airbus, preventing the company from forum shopping, the common tactic of seeking a lenient deal in the jurisdiction with the weakest laws. Traditional legal barriers like national sovereignty and corporate blocking statutes, which had frustrated past investigations, were swept aside by this cooperative model. It was as if different countries' elite financial detectives had agreed to operate under a single unified command for one critical mission: to dismantle Airbus's global network of corruption. The scale of the task was staggering. Investigators sifted through a mountain of digital evidence, totaling over 156 million documents. If printed and stacked, the pile of paper would reach for the heavens, a monument to a decade of deceit. They conducted more than 300 interviews, piecing together the intricate web of bribes, shell companies, and complicit executives that spanned 16 countries. Each agency took a strategic piece of the puzzle. The UK focused on corrupt deals in Malaysia and Ghana. The French took on a vast portfolio including China and the Middle East. And the US targeted violations of its powerful Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and arms export regulations. The net was closing. The evidence was overwhelming. A day of reckoning was coming. In a normal criminal case, a mountain of evidence like this would lead to a dramatic courtroom trial, public convictions, and lengthy jail sentences. But this was not a normal case. The Airbus scandal would not be resolved by a jury, but by a controversial and increasingly powerful legal tool, the Deferred Prosecution Agreement. A DPA and its French equivalent, the CJIP, is essentially a negotiated truce between prosecutors and a corporation. It's a pragmatic, if contentious, deal. The government secures a massive financial penalty, forces the company to admit to wrongdoing, and imposes sweeping internal reforms, all without the time and expense of a complex trial they might lose. The company, in turn, avoids a formal criminal conviction, the corporate death sentence that could trigger debarment and lead to its collapse. It is a solution that prioritizes corporate reform and stability over traditional punishment. For regulators, the logic is compelling. Why destroy a systemically important global company and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that depend on it when you can force it to pay a historic fine and clean up its act? This approach allows them to achieve their primary goals, punishment and deterrence, without causing catastrophic economic collateral damage. But this pragmatism comes at a steep price. A compromise that lies at the very heart of the Airbus story. That price is often individual accountability. The stage was set for a resolution that would be both a landmark victory for prosecutors and, in the eyes of many, a profound failure of justice. With $4 billion, you could purchase an entire fleet of new Airbus A380 Super Jumbos or cover the entire GDP of a small nation. On January 31, 2020, in synchronized court hearings held across Paris, London, and Washington, D.C., this abstract number became a concrete reality. The final judgment came down, and Airbus agreed to pay a historic €3.6 billion global settlement. The penalty was carefully and strategically divided among the three investigating nations. France, whose PNF led the investigation, received the largest share, over €2 billion, settled through a CJIP. The United Kingdom's SFO secured €991 million via a DPA, and the US Department of Justice collected $582 million, also through a DPA, after significantly reducing its own fine to avoid piling on duplicative penalties. Crucially, in recognition of its early and exemplary cooperation, Airbus received an enormous 50% discount on the punitive portion of the fine. This was the ultimate payoff for the high-stakes gamble it had taken 4 years earlier by self-reporting. The strategy had worked. The company had survived. It immediately began a painful but necessary process of reformation, purging its old leadership, completely dismantling the SMO and terminating over 100 employees implicated in the scheme. A new, stricter era of compliance had begun. The company paid the price, the system was reformed, and the case was closed. But this is where the story takes its most troubling and controversial turn. we must return, one last time, to our central question. What about the people who ran the machine? Did anyone actually go to jail? The answer is a stark and unequivocal no. Despite the mountain of evidence detailing a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar criminal conspiracy, despite the termination of over 100 employees and the resignation of the chief executive officer, not a single Airbus executive or employee has ever been criminally prosecuted for their role in the scheme. So what do you think? Is a multi-billion-dollar fine that forces deep corporate reform a true form of justice? Or is it simply an expensive license to operate when the people responsible never have to face a courtroom? Click here to check out another video and make sure to subscribe.